Hey guys, I want to do a video today, and this is going to kick off a series, a top 10 list, reasons why I believe that we are now indeed in Satan's little season. And this will be part of the study that we've been doing over the last few months. Has the millennial kingdom of Christ already occurred, and are we now in Satan's little season? We've looked at a lot of biblical passages of being in this era that we are in today, looking at the book of Revelation, look at Daniel, looking at other books of prophecy, looking at Jesus' own words of his second coming, of the destruction of Jerusalem and fall of Rome, all the old world buildings, and speculated on who built them and for what purpose. But today, I want to kick off a top 10 list on the deceptions that we see today and that the last several generations have experienced. The rise of supernatural deception. Leviticus 19:11, ye shall not steal, neither deal falsely, neither lie one to another. Words of the Lord. The second phrase, deal falsely. That is what is occurring now and has been done over the last 250 years. We've been deceived. There has been lies and deceit, and there's not a part of this world that Satan's lies and deception have not infiltrated. The serpent, lies and deception. I believe that Satan was released from the bottomless pit in 1776. I think that's a good hypothesis of the timing of the end of the millennial kingdom and the beginning of Satan's little season. And today I want to show the number 10 reason why I believe that we are truly indeed in Satan's little season. And this will be a good beginning to this topic because it will cover the last 250 years of wars that we have seen and experienced in this world. To deceive means to cause to accept as true or valid what is false or invalid. Synonyms being beguile, like the serpent beguiled Eve, mislead, delude. It implies imposing a false idea or belief that causes ignorance, bewilderment, or helplessness. And I believe that our generation and several generations past have experienced one, if not all, of these emotions during this era of deception. So in this series, I'm going to show you a lot of slides. I'm going to show you a lot of evidence of why I believe we're in Satan's little season. But I can't tell you everything. You're going to have to read between the lines. You're going to have to look closely at slides. You're going to have to understand how everything is connected. And this will take time. And with that, truthers, Christians who have seen through the deception and are trying to tell others this verse that Jesus said to his disciples as he sent them out to deliver the good news of Jesus Christ prior to his death, burial, and resurrection. Matthew 10:16, behold, I send you forth as sheep in the midst of wolves. Be ye therefore wise as serpents and harmless as doves. And I think our generation, this is a great verse to remember when we are telling others not only the good news of Christ, but what season we may be in, because there are indeed a lot of wolves out there. And these wolves have had their allegiance to Satan, and it's not just the false preachers behind pulpits who are teaching false gospels. This is an infiltration of every part of society. Our economic institutions, our political parties, our religious organizations, our scientific research labs, our government agencies, our educational institutions. There is not one institution in this world that Satan has not got his tentacles on. So let's begin. Number 10 reason I think that we are in Satan's little season are the wars that we have seen over the past 250 years during this time. And this slide here says Freemasons of the Revolution. and you see the American flag behind it. This slide's speaking of the American Revolution and Freemasons' involvement in the American Revolution. And as history buffs, we know that there were several Freemasons that were part of the American Revolution, the Declaration of Independence that was signed in 1776. Another thing that we'll see that occurred in 1776 was the beginning of the Illuminati. When you see Freemasons, Illuminati, the elites, secret societies, including Oddfellows, different entities like that, understand these are all branches of the same tree that give their allegiance to Lucifer. I was a college athlete, went to University of Alabama, played in the early 90s. We have booster clubs named Tide Pride, the Red Elephant Club, the A Club. They're all different clubs, but they all support the University of Alabama. In the same way, these different secret societies all support the same entity, Lucifer. And these Freemasons began in the early 18th century, awaiting on the release of Satan. They knew the timeline. They had rejected the millennial kingdom of Christ and were waiting on their light bearer, and were setting things in place for this transition of time. They knew exactly when it was going to occur, and they were ready when it did. This was the beginning of a changing of the guard. And so when you see Freemasons of the Revolution, and you see slides like that, and it speaks of the American Revolution, truly, this was a worldwide revolution. This was a Luciferian revolution. The French Revolution, the American Revolution, every other war that you see is part of this changing of the guard at that time. This is the symbol of Freemasonry, the square and compass that you will see, and you will see poses of Freemasons basically showing who their allegiance is to. Like George Washington here, our first United States president who led the American Revolution. George Washington was a Freemason, and you can see the distinctive pose that they give, and this is a symbol telling others within their club who they have given their allegiance to. But George Washington was not only the leader of the American Revolution, but he was the leader of this changing of the guard during the beginning of Satan's little season. And his job was to lead the Luciferian revolution in North America. And this is the first lady, Martha Washington, George Washington's wife. I'm going to blow this slide up. I think it's very important to understand, and I know you can't read it well, the fine print, so I'm going to read it, but this is labeled May 1st, 1776. The Illuminati is born from an extreme sect of Freemasonry. The founder of the Bavarian Illuminati was Adam Weishaupt, a German philosopher. And the four goals of the Illuminati listed here is an abolition of all monarchies and patriotism to it, the elimination of private property inheritance, the destruction of the traditional family, and the eradication of all religion. The goal of the Illuminati that was set up as part of the secret societies, these Luciferians, the Freemasons, we can just refer to them as the they, was to hide the previous era. The monarchy, the governmental system, and the patriots to this was the millennial kingdom of Christ. This is what they wanted to get rid of and hide the evidence of during the beginning of Satan's little season, and do it as quickly as possible. within a generation or two. And they did a pretty good job of it. The elimination of private property and the inheritance thereof. This was the usurping of old world buildings that were built, this angelic architecture during the millennial kingdom. So they tried to eliminate as quickly as possible evidence of the previous era of the millennial kingdom, and then took in possession as quickly as they could through war, through deceit, and other means, the old world buildings that were left behind of this era. And these old world buildings were used for worship, they were used for free energy. But after the end of the millennial kingdom of Christ, these Freemasons usurped them, renovated them, repurposed them and use them for their new world order going forward. The destruction of the traditional family. The patriots who knew of this previous era, they wanted to erase that memory, and if they couldn't erase the memories, then they would divide the families. And this was part of the American Revolution that we don't hear about. This is part of the French Revolution and all the other wars that went on as branches of those wars. And this led to the old world buildings that the Freemasons repurposed for prisons for those who did not go along with this new world order. They either were told to join or die, or be put in prison, having their families divided. That's where I believe the beginning of the orphan asylums, the insane asylums, why we see so many of these pop up during the first generation after Satan was loosed during the beginning of this little season of the late 18th century going into the 19th century. And the eradication of all religion. Get rid of Christianity specifically. And if you can't get rid of it, add false gospels to it, which they did in the 19th century. Now I'm speaking of the SDA, Jehovah's Witness, Mormonism, all these false gospels that popped up were part of this movement of the goals of the Illuminati. This is Adam Weishaupt, the founder of the Bavarian Illuminati. And you can see next to him the back of the dollar bill, the Great Seal. Annuit coeptus. Translated, he has approved our undertakings. And then below the pyramid with the all-seeing eye, you see Novus Ordo Seclorum, New World Order. This is not the eye of our Heavenly Father. This is the eye of the small g God that they gave their allegiance to when he was released from the bottomless pit. He has approved our undertakings is not in reference to our Heavenly Father, but was in reference to Lucifer. And that's what these Luciferians print on U.S. currency today. They put Freemasons on the front, like George Washington on the dollar bill, Andrew Jackson on the $20 bill, Benjamin Franklin on the $100 bill. And then on the back of our currency, they put these old world buildings that they stole. Old world buildings that were initially built during the millennial kingdom. This was a mantra at that time period of the American colonies, join or die. And this is what was occurring at that time. The serpent was about to be released from the bottomless pit. Either join him or die. And you can see the Massachusetts Sun, printed in March of 1775, a year before the Declaration of Independence of the United States. And you can see the serpent is being joined together. And the other image next to it, the dragon. This is in reference to joining this movement, this changing of the guard and given their allegiance to Lucifer, Satan, whatever moniker you want to give him, the dragon, the serpent. Here, they refer to him as liberty. And we did a video on the Statue of Liberty discussing that. Do thou, great liberty, inspire our souls and make our lives in thy possession happy, or our deaths glorious in thy just defense. This is liberty. This is Satan that is established now, looking over New York Harbor, a homage to the time of Satan's release in the era that we are in now, Satan's little season. American Freemasons, 3 centuries of building communities. I found this funny because Freemasons really didn't build anything. They found Freemasonry and they renovated and repurposed it. They eliminated those who had come before, or eliminated the memory of the era that was past. And if you did not join or die and build these new communities within this new world order, you were either imprisoned or worse. And Freemasonry in the American Revolution, but again, Freemasonry is a catch-all phrase for those that give their allegiance in the past and currently to Satan. And the American Revolution that occurred at that time, truly, the American Revolution was simply a branch of a bigger picture. This transition, this changing of the guard, this Luciferian revolution that was occurring with the serpent getting loosed and gaining liberty. And they were giving their allegiance to the light bearer in their eyes and making the true light a thing of the past and a past memory and erasing history, the millennial kingdom, and turning that era into what now is known as the Dark Ages. With this revolution, they had to burn the evidence of the previous era. That's why there were so many fires over the first 100 years after this transitional time. The Great New York Fire of 1776, a lost story of the American Revolution. But this occurred for decades and decades afterwards. Books were burned. Those who did not go along with it were imprisoned or worse. Buildings were destroyed to gain power, gain control and resources, but also to eliminate the past history and do it as quickly as possible. We talked about the Great New Orleans Fire. Every United States major city in the 1800s had a great fire of some kind. This was the Great Fire of New Orleans in 1788. And the reason that they give for this fire not being extinguished was because the priests refused to allow church bells to be rung as fire alarms because it was Good Friday. And so you will hear outlandish stories that are not believable, but they're so not believable that you're just like, oh, well, I guess that truly happened. Again, as part of the deception. Ruining history. The War of 1812. The British marching into Washington and destroying buildings. This was basically a continuation, another nation as a pawn of the bigger picture, this Luciferian revolution, and they were destroying evidence of a past history. And those that didn't go along with it, this is when this truly kicked off, and all these things that we hear about and wonder, why were there insane asylums that look so grandiose? Why were there orphan asylums and orphan trains? Why was this occurring? That is part of the bigger picture. Another print of the War of 1812 and the British storming into Washington, D.C. to destroy the Romanesque buildings with the domes, the cathedral-like old world angelic architecture. Those buildings that didn't get destroyed were taken over by them and repurposed into governmental agencies, institutions, museums, so that they can further their false history, whether it be in geopolitical fashion or natural history. This is the Great Fire of Chicago that occurred later on in the latter part of the 1800s. Again, the same narrative. You see the spires, you see the domes. All this was destroyed, and all the books and everything else within it. And the reason is because a cow knocked over a candle in a barn and it destroyed Chicago. Again, outlandish stories. This is part of the deception. Here's the Great Fire of Boston occurring about the same time as Chicago's. Same story, same narrative, just a different location, but for the same purpose. George Orwell, who is famous for writing 1984, Animal Farm, books that we had to read in high school. One of his quotes, "Who controls the past controls the future, and who controls the present controls the past." During Satan's little season of deception that we're in, they have changed and rewritten history and now control what we know about the past. The past that we know today in our history books, known as the Dark Ages. It was just the opposite. And this leads me to the rewriting and changing of history that occurred at the same time as all these revolutions were breaking out at the beginning of Satan's little season. This book by Edward Gibbon, The History of the Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire, a 6-volume complete series on the fall of Rome, was released in 1776. Here's Edward Gibbon, a Freemason, and his 6-volume epic on the fall of the Roman Empire. If you look at the citations and sources, it is very scant. It is minuscule. It's a joke. But yet, he had enough research to write 6 volumes. And so, either he completely made it up and rewrote history, and much of what we know about the fall of the Roman Empire in today's history books go back to this initial source of 1776, or he knew exactly what happened and he changed the narrative and added a bunch of lies to a little bit of truth. And I think that is part of it. I think that these people within these secret societies that began at the loosing of Satan's little season, their big secret that they know and we don't is that the millennial kingdom of Christ has already occurred. They know that, and they know that they've been advancing a new world order, Satan's little season, over the past almost 250 years. They know what time frame, what period they are in. They know what's happened in the past, but they've rewritten history so that we don't know. Just like George Orwell's quote, "Who controls the past controls the future, and who controls the present controls the past." That's what they are trying to do, and they're doing a good job of it during this age of deception. And this reminds me of John McLean, Edward Gibbon that we previously saw. As far as rewriting history, this was obviously a Freemason, and you can see his pose there. He was a Boston native, and gave a lot of money, contributed to Massachusetts General Hospital. And he had a old world building, the McLean building, named after him, that the Freemasons didn't build, but they repurposed it for a hospital and then put McLean's name on it. But John McLean, not only was part of this founding of Mass General Hospital, but he was a Harvard professor, and he taught ancient and modern history. And so this is what they do. They put people like this that know the past history and then lie to students at Harvard University. They write books and lie and put them out, and so others can read this, and all of a sudden you do this, you destroy the evidence of the past, and then you rewrite it. And within a small amount of time, just a generation or two, a new historical narrative comes up out of thin air. And that's what occurred during this time frame. Napoleon Bonaparte, you can see the pose here. He was the George Washington of Europe. He was in charge of carrying out the Luciferian Revolution in Europe and Asia, and he did a good job of it. The Napoleonic Wars, and you can see, was not just in France and a small part of Europe. This was over a decade-long revolution where the goals of the Illuminati began. The abolition of the previous history and patriotism to it of the Millennial Kingdom, the elimination of private property inheritance, the destruction of the traditional family, and the elimination of religion. This was Napoleon's job during the beginning of Satan's Little Season in that part of the world. And you can see a picture here, it's a little blurry, of Napoleon in Russia. You can see the fire behind there, burning cities, burning Moscow. Here's another photo of Napoleon marching out of Moscow after setting the city ablaze. But this is what was going on, and this is the reason why. So all the narratives that we're taught in our history books on why wars started, I hope you're beginning to understand why they were started and who truly was behind it. Let's go, and we can talk about the Civil War. Ulysses S. Grant was a odd fellow. Robert E. Lee's dad was a Freemason, and that era was continuing what was began during the earlier revolutions, but beginning in the 20th century, when the military-industrial complex had been totally infiltrated by these people, and technology advanced more and more during Satan's Little Season, we began to see world wars. What started World War I? This is a slide for Kids Connect. So we're telling our kids, the King of Austria, King Ferdinand, was assassinated, and that began World War I. But now we know that's just a guise to basically not show truly what was going on and why wars were started. Here is the president, Woodrow Wilson, and his wife, Edith. Woodrow Wilson was the U.S. president during World War I. And he was part of a secret society at Princeton, the Ivy Club. And take a good look at his wife, Edith. Here's another picture of Edith Wilson. but the destruction of old world buildings, setting the previous era on fire, getting rid of evidence, and increasing their footprint on world politics, the geopolitical arena. All this was occurring during World War I. This was just a continuation of Satan's little season. You can see here Zeppelins dropping bombs on cities of Europe. You can see again these old world buildings. These were all over the world, and many have been destroyed. And those that haven't are owned by those who have given their allegiance to Satan in the little season. But this is what happened to many of these old world buildings over the last 250 years. World War II. Franklin Delano Roosevelt was the president at the beginning of World War II. He was a Freemason. He was an odd fellow. Harry Truman, who was president at the end of World War II, who succeeded FDR, was also, you guessed it, a Freemason and an odd fellow. And this is FDR with his wife, Eleanor. Here's another picture of Eleanor Roosevelt. But cities like this, Dresden, Germany, were bombed during World War II. A continuation of bombing of this angelic architecture that was built during a prior civilization, the millennial kingdom of Christ. Here's another photo that was adapted from black and white to color of Dresden, Germany before World War II. And this is what Dresden, Germany looked like after World War II. This is a crime that these buildings in the city was destroyed in that manner. The devastating 1,000 bomber raid on Germany during World War II. This was a raid on Cologne, Germany by the British Army. And you can see all the fireworks going up around Cologne during this bombing by the British. And I found it interesting that they named this air raid Operation Millennium. They say it's because 1,000 bombers bombed Cologne, Germany. But these Freemasons use symbols, and truly, I believe it was representative of eliminating evidence of the millennial kingdom of Jesus Christ. You can see all the bombs dropped during this era. Every one of those bombs, if it landed on target, were eliminating evidence of the millennial kingdom of Christ. And you can see the mass destruction. And they really don't care who gets in their way. This was Berlin before World War II. And absolutely gorgeous. Again, if any of this or all of this was destroyed, it is a crime. You can see the domes, the huge buildings, this angelic architecture that was used as a source of free energy and worship during the millennial kingdom of Christ. During this era, it's no longer being used for that purpose, but afterwards it's completely destroyed. You can see the Romanesque buildings, the domes, in the middle of a German city. This is because this was from a previous worldwide era that they were trying to get rid of. Now moving up to our generation, especially as Americans, 9/11, the Twin Towers, the terrorists hitting the Twin Towers after hijacking planes and running them into the towers. And then after several hours, the steel got so hot that it collapsed like a controlled demolition because the steel was too hot from these airplanes that ran into the top of the towers. That is what we were told with the World Trade Center report, the 9/11 report, several years afterwards, after multiple engineers and scientists looked at the data. And you can see one of the airplanes coming in to the Twin Towers after the first one had been hit. I don't know how much of the airplane they found, but they did found the passports, I think, of the hijackers. Thank goodness. And this was our president at the time during 9/11, George W. Bush, a member of Skull and Bones, just like his dad, George Sr., and just like John Kerry, actually, that you see there to the right, shaking hands with George W. Bush. But they're all in the same club. George Sr.'s speech 11 years prior to the day of the 9/11 terrorist attack gave a address of the nation and said, out of these troubled times, our fifth objective, a new world order. This is what he is a part of, this new world order. And people ask me, how long do you think Satan's little season has lasted? If it's little, why do you think it's taken so long? But I hope you see how it takes time to deceive the nations to the point that we're getting to. It takes several generations of eliminating history of the past and indoctrinating and reshape the minds of those present and of the future in order to get to the point that we know is going to occur and prophesied of in the Bible at the end of the little season. So it's going to take as long as it's going to take. But we're pretty close. George Bush is holding up in 1990 the fifth objective, a new world order, and he says we will get there. And I think 9/11 was part of it. But you see George W. Bush and his mother, Barbara, George Sr.'s wife. And there's Barbara Bush. But what these Luciferians will do is they will destroy people, places, and things. And it doesn't matter who or what, as long as it furthers their agenda of this new world order. But once they do that, they will memorialize those victims of the past, those buildings of the past, because that's what they do. This is part of Satan's little season. This is part of the deception. The One World Trade Center that arose from the ashes after the Twin Towers collapsed straight down with a what looked to me as a controlled demolition is 1,776 feet tall. Again, it's all symbology. The Gulf War occurred after 9/11, and we were told there was weapons of mass destruction that we were searching and seeking out. You know, the invisible boogeyman, the terrorists, we have to go get. And this war went on for a while, and many bombs were dropped. No weapons of mass destruction were ever found. But going forward, if we truly are in Satan's little season, and this is one of the evidences of these wars that have occurred since Satan has been loosed from the bottomless pit, then what is next? We've seen the revolutions, we've seen the civil wars, we've seen the World War I, World War II. Could World War III look like this? And this leads me to the end of this video, and we will talk about this topic specifically on other videos going forward. But I just want to introduce this, that if we indeed are in Satan's little season, the next big thing is the deceived nations encompassing the camp of the saints, seeking to destroy it, and that fire from the heavens, from God, destroy those that are attacking it, the deceived at that time. So it's interesting to me that the United States Space Force was developed and instituted as part of the military branch of the United States in 2020 by Donald Trump. This is the newest division that U.S. government has introduced since NASA in 1958. And it's interesting, is this a sign of what's to come? You know, if they developed NASA in 1958 and then 11 years later in 1969, they faked a moon landing to justify the development of NASA, what's going to occur in our near future with the United States Space Force being developed? If it's being developed, they're going to use it for a reason. And could it be where in the future we hear of alien contact, and then possibly an alien invasion, and then possibly something coming to attack Earth, and we can actually visibly see it, and that we see signs enlisting young Americans for the Space Force to be a guardian of the galaxy and a protector of Earth because we have aliens invading? This could be World War III's Uncle Sam, I Want You logo. And we've been prepped for this for decades with space movies, with superhero movies, with alien invasion movies. You can see here Independence Day and this huge mothership coming down, attacking the United States. What if this scenario that we see in Independence Day is actually prepping the minds of the deceived nations for what is to come? But what if it's not a mothership, but what has been prophesied in Revelation 20, heavenly Jerusalem descending from heaven? What if we are being deceived to the point where we believe that heavenly Jerusalem is aliens coming to attack Earth, and that we need to defend it? We know this is going to occur, and if we're in Satan's little season, this is the next big thing to occur. This is getting very, very close to the end of the book of Revelation, with heavenly Jerusalem descending with the Lord and Lamb within it. This is the time of judgment. This is the time where fire comes and destroys those that are attacking New Jerusalem, the deceived nations that have gotten their armies and encompassed the camp of the saints. But after that, a new heavens, a new earth is created. The resurrection of the last day occurs. The great white throne judgment occurs. And the beginning of everything you see at the end of Revelation begins. So if we are indeed in Satan's little season, this era of deception, this is the next thing to come. So again, as Christians, we need to be wise as serpents, harmless as doves. And in Satan's little season, tell others the good news of Jesus Christ and be the light of the world. We'll do another video soon. God bless.